All right, I'm sure if anyone else comes along a bit late, they can jump onto the YouTube channel and catch up if need be. So thank you all for taking your time to join us for the Track 2, Creating a Faster and More Efficient Resource Allocation Systems workshop. Just a very quick admin note. I know that we've had a few comments coming in. People haven't heard from team members or been having trouble finding teams or have had people drop out and whatnot. We encourage everybody straight after the track to jump back onto Ramo, the platform we're using for the hack, and get onto the third floor specifically, which is designed for Track 2 teams. And that's where you might be able to find some other people to merge a team. We'll be putting out a form later on today for tomorrow morning to confirm who's in which teams and where everything ends up. Please do try and reach out to people and have a conversation with people there, or even if you do have a team, have a conversation with people in the other teams and get to meet each other. And that, as I've previously said, things will be put on YouTube afterwards where you can catch up if need be. So on that note, I'd love to introduce Mr. Tom Worthington. Tom is an honorary lecturer in computer science at the Australian National University and works as an independent consulting certified computer professional. He is a member of the Sahana Foundation for Open Source Disaster Management and has been an expert witness in a number of high-profile international court cases. Tom is the former president of the Australian Computer Society and the previous director for technical issues for information systems in the Department of Defence, and has a wealth of experience working in government policy, strategic consulting and mentoring, and has very kindly volunteered his time to work with us today and through the hack as our Track 2 leader. So on that note, I'd love to hand over to Tom. Take it away.
Okay, let's see. I've got my audio on, I've got my video on, and I see we have some participants there, which is good. Now, what I want to emphasize is I'm not a logistics specialist. I'm a computer professional, former bureaucrat at the Defence Department and an educator. So there'll be other people you'll hear from throughout this event, more expert in logistics than I am, but I'll do my best. Now, what I want you to do is interrupt me at any time. You can ask a question in the chat forum. I've just posted a link to a brief bit of material I'll be using. So you can click on that link and have a look at that if you can't see it when I screen share. You can post a question in there. You can try putting up your hand in the video, or you can just simply start talking. And if you could turn on your video, that would make it easier, although that's not entirely necessary. These sorts of activities are not about me preparing my wisdom and presenting it to you. It's about you doing something active and me being a resource to help. So let me try and do screen share. Let's see if it works. I'm just going to simply share the blog post in that link you got. I've got my mobile phone here as well, sitting there with a separate internet connection, running Zoom as well with the chat forum showing as a backup. One of the lessons you learn working somewhere like the Defence Department or in some of the voluntary emergency projects I worked on is technology goes wrong. You need multiple redundant pieces of hardware and network connections and links to keep things going when things go wrong. But if someone could be a thumbs up to say you can actually see my screen now. Mr. Jones, for example. Oh, thank you. I got a thumbs up there. Okay.
Yes, no, it's all good.
So as I understand it, we're here to help fight pandemics, and we're looking at, in this case, logistics. So the first question to do with logistics is, what is it? So I've done what I normally tell my students not to do. I've gone to the Wikipedia and got a description from there, because this is a great place to get a very simple little summary of something that people have prepared on a topic. And I've actually contributed some things to the Wikipedia on occasions. Obviously, you should look for a more authoritative original source in your own work. But this is a good way to start to get an idea. So logistics, we're talking about organization, really complex, detailed organization about getting things or people from where they are to where you need to use them, and using them called consumption normally in the case of food, medical supplies and so on. But keep in mind, it could be equipment that is reused, or it could be people with particular expertise, such as healthcare workers. So it can be goods and equipment. You might also like to think about intangible goods as well. So could you apply the same technique to information, which can be vital in dealing with a pandemic? It's no good if you have the masks, gloves and gowns if you don't know how to put them on without contaminating yourself in the process. So those aspects of it will need to be considered at the same time. How do you provide the instructions for doing this? How do you advise people on how to repair what they're doing or assemble it? If it's food, what is it? It needs to be labeled. Now, this is an area of specialization. In fact, my nephew is a logistics expert in this area. And around Australia, there are very large warehouses, like the one depicted in this photo here, but even bigger ones of these. These could be 5, 10 times the size of a football field, or larger, with multi-story racks for holding equipment, with either people in forklift trucks driving around, these days with a computer screen in front of them telling them where to go and what to put, or a robotic forklift with nobody in it doing it automatically. And there are multiple levels of these warehouses. Generally, the closer to the customer, the smaller the warehouse is. And then there'll be regional, global ones, and they will be supplied by aircraft, by ships, by trains, by trucks. And the closer you get to the customer, it might be drones, little robot aeroplanes. It might be tiny little trucks. It might be people on bicycles or people on foot, especially in an emergency. So in this part of it, you're thinking about what do people need, how do they get it there. So what's a pandemic? Has anybody, I explained, I mean, perhaps that's self-evident, but here's another bit of Wikipedia. So a pandemic is an epidemic of an infectious disease spread across a large region, multiple continents or worldwide, affecting a lot of people. So COVID-19, SARS-2, is a pandemic because it's affecting people in multiple countries across the world. You don't need a pandemic to worry about logistics. If this is just affecting one country or one region, you can still have problems when there's a large-scale epidemic and you need to get supplies and people in there to help with it. And the photo here from the 1918 flu pandemic, it is remarkable how similar a lot of the lessons from our current pandemic are the same as those from 1918. You'll see they're wearing cloth masks. They've got some protective clothing on. They're using an ambulance, a stretcher, a person covered in blankets. And there's somebody who looks like the military there assisting. And this is very much like is happening today. And the more difficult things get, the more they may start to resemble this photograph. So one of the things there is you're doing a hackathon, you're doing innovation, but you don't have to invent something completely new and different. You may well go back and look at 1918, see what they did, and see if you can go, oh, now we could do that today, but we could use a computer for doing that. We could use a drone, we could use an electric bicycle. We could update it in some way, but essentially do what they did then and was shown to work. So have a think about those sorts of things. In terms of how we do things today, a few years ago, I helped with the Sahana disaster management system. The image here is from their warehouse inventory system. So this is a piece of software developed by a not-for-profit organization based in California, but originally established after the Boxing Day tsunami in the Indian Ocean in 2004. So a group of computer professionals and people from the government in Sri Lanka got together, quickly wrote some software to help coordinate disaster operations for the relief operation in Sri Lanka. What they did then was they went on to develop it more and make it available to anybody who needed it around the world where there was a disaster. And that's been used across the world in hurricanes, cyclones, earthquakes, so forth. They kept adding features to it. They added a warehouse inventory system and have a system where people can put in requirements and then people can put in what's available in various warehouses. You might think, okay, well, that solved the problem. Why don't we just use this? But when you look at it, it's fairly basic. It doesn't do very much, and it may not suit what we need today. But that's one resource that's there, and there are others you can have a look for to see what might be already done, give you some ideas of what's useful. So we have, how long do we have, Mr. Jones? Turn on your microphone.
Yes, that'll help. We've got essentially another 2 hours until the workshop starts. We did sort of block out 45 minutes we've scheduled, but if you'd like to keep going for up to 2 hours, you're more than welcome. And as long as
what I wanted to do was ask some questions and see whether our participants there would like to provide some input to them.
Yeah, not a problem.
So these questions are based on my experience in helping with hackathons and startup projects before. And we've, in a sense, the first one has been asked in this morning's IBM workshop about where you, there was a female, Claire, something like that. But you were trying to identify a typical customer, client. So the question is, who are you trying to help with the logistics? So there's a danger. People tend to think of this as a mechanical process. We're writing computer code, we're setting up a system, we're going to build something. But the first question to ask is, who's it for? And who's it ultimately for? And clarifying who the client, who the customer is. And there might be the doctor, but the doctor's doing it for a patient. So you might want to look at where they are, what their conditions are. Often you'll try and solve the problem for the entire world in all circumstances, and that doesn't work. You've got to focus in on a particular situation. So what's being managed? Are we talking about people, medical supplies, equipment, something else? And, you know, are we going to work out how we can get people to a particular place quickly, or how can we can train people somewhere? How do we get medical supplies somewhere, or how do we build them, sew masks, whatever, send a sewing machine, send instructions. how do you identify where and what you need? Because a common situation with an emergency is well-meaning people will send large quantities of supplies that aren't needed and will on occasion clog up a port or an airport with useless stuff. So what's really needed can't get there. And how do you decide what goes where? Because you only have a limited amount of supplies, transport, warehouses. How do you decide who gets what? So they're the sorts of questions I think we need to ask. But I'd like to ask our two participants here to turn on their microphones and let us know if you've got any thoughts on what sort of thing you're going to work on and these sorts of things. Who's it for, what it is, where. Oh, there's my telephone. Excuse me while I turn that, turn it off. And how you're going to allocate resources. Speak to us.
Do you want us to present our ideas?
Just briefly. I don't want a 20-minute, pitch
Yeah, of
or
course.
anything. But yeah.
Uh,
what have you got
so
in mind?
My idea is that we have something like a blog or something like a web page. It consists of database of 3D printed parts, but only files. And then also have a map of where volunteers that have 3D printers can print it's available to print their parts. It would also have a request and verification of whether the parts work. And if you want some part, you can always request it online. This is like a platform for all information to go through. And it would mostly be on GitHub. And that's the idea. It would be run by volunteers. And because obviously you can't pump that much money into the program without volunteers. So it would be basically volunteers, and the platform processes information.
Okay, so you're going to have a database of 3D designs for
Yes.
things to be produced, and you can identify where there are 3D printers they could be made. That's a good idea. So who's it for? Who's going to benefit from this?
I think the benefit of the people that would be benefiting from this is when resources are scarce, or when certain parts are difficult to find. For instance, if it's Doctors Without Borders, maybe they have a plane with a cruise, but you can't always have helicopters flying in and out. But you're going to have electricity, and you can bring a small 3D printer to print that valve that you need in that particular shape, and that would come in handy. Or a region where people live in a countryside and takes a very many hours of car to have one part shipped to one place, and these people can afford a 3D printer, and they can have a 3D printer. And another.
Okay, so we've got.
Yeah.
Sorry, so we've got Doctors Without Borders. So these are doctors who help out in emergencies.
Yeah.
You're going to put a 3D printer on a plane, which they can take with them. That's good because that makes it a lot more concrete, a lot more understandable, even if you could use it for lots of other purposes. When you say Doctors Without Borders, that's good. Everybody knows who they are.
Okay.
Okay, so you've got this 3D printer printing parts. What are the... So we've got the who you're helping,
Okay.
and we've got the what in a way that they're parts. What sort of parts are they?
Oh, so the parts would be valves for the IV drips and other things. You can have a mask, but without the filter. The mask itself is not complicated. It's only the filter that is. And you can have flashlights. So for specific parts where the ones that goes in the ears like a cone shape, anything that doesn't require metals or extreme precision, like a syringe, then you can be able to print it. Sometimes even the cast, not a brace around the arm when the arm is broken, even those parts can be printed.
Okay, so these are parts either for medical instruments or the personal, what's the term, PPE, personal protective equipment worn by the doctors. That's good. You can actually, with a more sophisticated 3D printer, you can print metal parts. That sort of printer's probably beyond the budget of medical Doctors Without Borders, but they would have one. For example, if the Navy was nearby, they will have one on their supply ship or on an aircraft carrier, for example. So the US Navy has these things. So you could even send the file to them. They'd print it and deliver them by helicopter from nearby. But yeah, okay. So you've got the what. How do you? Would this be in a particular sort of place that they would need it? Is this everywhere that these sorts of doctors go to? In a pandemic, is there a particular level of medical organization? Presumably you're not going to send a 3D printer out next to every doctor, next to every patient in a tent. So at what level do you do this?
That's why we are trying to compensate for this by introducing a map with volunteers with 3D printers. So it would be easier for people to find the 3D printer when they need it.
Okay, so you're going to make use of existing printers that would be around the place.
Yes.
Okay, well that's good. So you'd have a map. You can identify where they are. What about allocating the resources? You've got a limited number of printers.
Yes.
How do you work out what should be printed, or is that somebody else's job?
I'm actually not entirely sure about the priority of where things are getting printed. I suppose that people would have to figure them out themselves. Like,
well, for example, as well as identifying where there's a printer, I guess you'd want to know what model it was and how fast it could print, for example, and how big things it could print, and maybe other characteristics, multiple colors or something. So you might be able to use that. So people could work out, I need 1,000 valves. Which printers can do that?
We're thinking like an Uber-like map. So when you click on the map, you see how fast it can print, how big it's printing, what they can actually be capable of printing. For instance, some can print metal, perhaps. Maybe it will be that.
Okay, now you mentioned Uber. If this was a for-profit startup pitch, then it'd be best not to mention Uber because everybody talks about Uber. But this isn't a for-profit one, so that's okay. But the other aspect of I'd suggest you might want to look at is materials cost money. So are you assuming all the printing is free?
Well, perhaps. Well, I would appreciate volunteers, but perhaps we can have a Patreon account where people have crowdfunding. So maybe we can give some money to the people that help printed stuff, even though the money may not be involved.
Yeah. So even if money isn't involved, the printers have consumables. They have spools of plastic to print. Will you also be tracking the supplies for the printers, so you can know that these printers can be kept fed with materials so they can keep working.
Yeah, I suppose that we can do that. We have to add another extra feature on the web page about repairing and keeping track of how much actually people are printing and how much money we can offer the people after they've been printing maybe lots of items, lots of hours. Upon the 100 hour we will have to give them money for repairing and compensation for the efforts.
Okay, or you might consider, is there already a system for tracking something simple like spools of stuff? You might use Sahana's warehouse system or something else. The other thing to look at is do a web search to see if somebody has already done some aspect of it. So my other nephew happened to set up a 3D printing business. And I seem to remember there were some online websites where you could go and it would tell you where the nearest 3D printer was. And it was kind of like a franchise operation. There might have even been one set up in Canberra at our innovation network. So you might want to hunt around, see if there are any commercial operations like this. Perhaps you can make use of them in an emergency, or perhaps you can get a few ideas from them, how they work. Or you could even say to them, okay, what about an emergency option? Would your members be willing to volunteer and be on a list? So in an emergency, they will be available for printing medical supplies. And then you have a ready-made list of materials, locations that you can then make use of for your emergency system. So you might want to hunt around and see if there's a thing like that. But yes, that sounds to me like quite a reasonable sounding application, which involves logistics and would be worthwhile. The worry is that it sounds so good, maybe someone's already done it.
Yes.
So in which case, when you're presenting it to people, you'll have to be able to be aware of what's already there and be able to say, but ours is better because it does this, or ours adds to what's already been done, or theirs isn't applicable in a pandemic, or something. So you need to be aware what's already out there. But that's good. What about our other participant here? Have you got an idea there? Or are you part of the same project?
We've actually got about 10 people on there, Tom, just so you know. I'm not sure if the screen might be cropping them
sorry,
out,
I can only see 2.
No, we've got about 10 people on board.
Let me just increase. Let me stop the sharing. I think that's blocking up my view of everything. Okay. Oh, that's much better. Now I can see everyone else. Okay. Anybody else?
Hi, good afternoon, Tom and guys. So this is Zhichao from Team Go Baby Go. So I'm currently thinking about the delivery management system, maybe to allocate the medical resources, like from the medicine shop or chemists, so we can do a centralized management of these resources and to deliver them to the people who need them. I mean, during this pandemic situation, we wouldn't encourage people to go out to buy this stuff. I mean, maybe we can choose some location or place to just finish this delivery. I mean, it's kind of like a food delivery for me, but it just needs some extra applications or methods to suit it for this pandemic situation, I think. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So we're talking about pharmacies, pharmacists with medicines, and how to get them to the patient.
Yes, so
The,
the persona would be the person, I mean, maybe potential patient, or some guys want to protect themselves from the coronavirus. And we just want to think of a way to make this delivery fast or efficient.
okay, so you've got the patient, as it were. The what's being managed are personal medical equipment or supplies. So where are these people and where are the supplies?
Yeah. So, yes, that's actually.
So, for example, are the people are they at home, or are they in emergency shelters, hospitals?
Yeah. So regarding these questions, which brings up a more physical question. So should we have a like imaginary base location for this logistics process? Like say, for example, the Canberra or Melbourne or Sydney, some cities, I mean specific cities.
You can select a specific real location, although when you're in the middle of a pandemic, that can be difficult because people will relate too closely to it, and they might say, well, that's not happening here, or they might say, there are people dying here, why are you playing with it? So you might want to invent a fictional location, like the fictional persona, an imaginary city which is similar to Melbourne or Canberra or somewhere, and give it a made-up name. It might be good to do as an example. And I'd suggest you need to think about, because different places have different distributions of population. So getting supplies to people in houses in a suburb where they're very spread out is a different problem to if they're in an apartment building where there's many people close together, and you can, for example, land a drone on the roof and then distribute them in the elevator, versus a suburb which is quite spread out. But I suggest you need to think about where are these supplies located? Are they at pharmacists which are distributed fairly widely, or are they at a central distribution centre? Are there 2 levels of distribution required? You have to get them to the pharmacy and then get them to the individual customer. Are you going to short circuit that process? So about 5 kilometres to the north of where I am now in central Canberra, Google have a warehouse and a drone landing pad, and they actually fly drones from there, and you hear them buzzing overhead. And in effect, they can skip the local distribution over some kilometres. Excuse me. So I suggest you think about that. How will you identify, how will you know where the customers are and where the supplies are? So I presume you're going to build a system, but how are you going to obtain the information to put into it? Have you given that any thought? Where's it going to, where's the data going to come from?
Yeah, for now, I'm thinking about a mobile phone application for people to log on and to like select the merchandise or the equipment they want, and then we can get a feedback. Or maybe their locations, they'd like to receive the things, so we can deliver it to the destination. And
okay, and you're assuming that the patient will know what they want. So they don't need a doctor, for example, or some sort of expert to say to them, oh, you need a something or other. They can self-diagnose, as it were.
oh, yeah, about this, I'm thinking like about the doctor and patients. It's maybe a different story. I mean, I'm currently thinking about just the normal citizens of the imaginary city. Maybe they just need some general protections. I mean, we have the patients, maybe we have hospitals and doctors to help them, but our general citizens also need protection, I mean, self-protection, to avoid the increase of the cases.
Okay, and if there's a shortage of these items, that's my question 4. How are the resources allocated? How do you decide who gets what's available and who doesn't?
Oh, yeah. That's a question I haven't thought about. Maybe we need to discuss.
And so typically you might say, for example, well, vulnerable people should get it. So people who are old, normally in an epidemic, it would be people who are very young, children as well. With COVID-19, it looks like it doesn't affect young people as much, but does affect old people. So in your app, you might have the person put in their age and their gender. So for example, currently, I think men are more at risk than women. And you might say, well, thank you for your request, but you know, we have to prioritize and you're on the bottom of the list for this supply. So that's something to think about when you're identifying who the people you're working with, as to what sort of information you need to know about them. And of course, how much is available, how much you need to keep in reserve for emergencies. The sort of things we think about with logistics. But that also sounds like a reasonable application to work on. And smartphone apps work extremely well for this situation. You might want to consider, could there be a version of it that would use SMS as well? Because in some places, in some situations, if the telecommunications network is limited or it's not holding up, then a smartphone app that needs lots of data being transmitted stops working, but an SMS message will still get through. So it might be worth thinking about, is there a version that'll work in that way? But yeah, that sounds quite good. And you've got a team to work on this?
Yeah, we build a team.
That's good. And I'm assuming there'll be other people telling you about how to form a team and what skills to get and all that sort of thing, how to prepare your case and present and so forth. Okay. How are we doing for time, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, look, we're probably getting near the allocated time. So the 45 minutes that we did have allocated. Let me double check the schedule. I'll make sure that I'm right on that. We do have a bit more time, sort of, I guess, free time, if you'd like to call it. Oh, computer didn't like that. You might want to come up.
And while you're looking up that, somebody else might
yeah, for sure.
to volunteer to tell us about their project.
I do have that up now very quickly. So from 3 to 5 was allocated as teamwork time, but of course this is quite valuable time as far as I'm concerned. Tom's got a wealth of knowledge there and has been excellent so far. So I'd definitely recommend making the most of that while we've still got him on the line for sure.
Okay, well, why don't we see if someone else would like to tell us about their project?
Hey.
Okay. Hello, Kay. You might need to speak up a bit there.
All right, just a minute. Hi, Tom. Can you hear me now clearly?
Yes, you just need to hold the microphone steady because it sort of sounded like it was bumping on something.
What about right now?
Yes, that's good.
Okay, cool. Right. So our idea is kind of similar with what Zhichao just shared, but it's different in terms of we are allocating patients. So for example, we'll develop an app and then we will get the location of the user who needs to go to hospital for like some regular checkup or for like some hospitalization. So basically we will kind of determine which hospital would be, of course, the nearest and also would be have the most available resources for the patient. Because for example, let's say, let's take Canberra Hospital. Maybe Canberra Hospital is the nearest to my place, but it could be quite busy out there. And if I go to Canberra Hospital during COVID-19, I might risk getting infection. Meanwhile, all I need is to just get a, like a basic medical checkup. So I might want to see if there's any, like alternative hospital they can go to, which is not too far, but has plenty of resources. For example, medicine, doctors, bed spaces that can accommodate my need. So that's the idea, the basic idea that we have in our mind right now.
Okay, and you've got a team?
Yeah, we do have a team. Mm-hmm.
Okay, now this is a bit tricky because this is something where if you're in a area that's functioning, the medical organisations that run the hospital and the local government would generally have something like this if things are working. But in a pandemic, that might change. So, for example, next to Canberra Hospital, they built an emergency hospital on a football field, which is sitting there fully equipped and waiting just in case we have an outbreak in Canberra and the main Canberra hospital is overloaded. There's a completely built hospital. They're using it for some of the routine testing at the moment, but otherwise it's empty. And that hospital wouldn't be on the normal system. Hopefully they'll be adding it. So you'd want to check, are there particular areas where your system could supplement what's already there, or the existing system doesn't work because of a disaster or because it's in an area where they're building lots of emergency clinics. So you'd have to think a bit about what circumstance in which this would be needed. I guess you're managing hospital beds and medical services rather than particular people or physical objects.
Yeah, kinda. Because back in the country where I'm from Malaysia, by the way. So what happened is that when my father, he went to the hospital and he has to, like wait for at least 7 hours to just see a doctor. And I just think it's so inefficient. And so in the end, he might have to like deroute to another hospital and it might actually end up faster than the first hospital. So I guess the metric of allocating the people to the respective hospital would be like what you say, the available bed, and also how congested it is, like how many patients are waiting in line currently, and also available staff, like available doctors who are on shift, nurses, etc. Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this would be also a problem in places like the USA, where they have multiple independent for-profit hospitals. And unlike somewhere like the UK, Australia, there isn't that centralized system. Even in Australia, it was only after the pandemic started that our private hospitals were brought more closely and coordinated with the public hospitals. So yeah, I can see that in Malaysia. Wonderful place. I hope to get back there for another visit. I've been to a few conferences in KL.
Oh, that's good
and a little
to hear.
bit around the country.
Yeah.
So you might have
Are you guys
a difficulty.
doing okay with the mics and the cams on Ramo? Anything wrong?
Hello, I'm getting someone talking
Yeah,
about
sorry.
Ramo.
Yeah, sorry. Catherine just kind of interrupted. But it's all good. It's all good now. Yep. Sorry. Yep. What did you just say?
Yeah, I was just saying you need to be able to explain how your system will fit into whatever government or private system exists, so that you don't cut across them and you can work with them, and that you're managing medical services, as it were, not pills or things. I think the question 3 about how are places and needs identified is fairly clear in your case. You're going to identify where the hospitals are, where the people who need them are. How are you going to allocate resources? So if there's more people who need to go to the hospital than there are hospital beds, what are you going to do?
Sorry. Are you saying that, like when you have a lot of people who need hospital beds? And how
are you going to triage them is the technical term.
Yeah, so initially we thought of kind of allocating them by first come, first serve basis. But just now when I was hearing you, offering insights, I was reminded that, we have vulnerable people, we have children who might need help, who might need medical assistance, like more urgent than other people. So it's definitely something that we have to keep in mind when we work on the app. Like we need to make sure, like for example, if A use the app first, and then we kind of allocate A a bed space, but then we have B who is pregnant and who has to give birth immediately. We definitely has to kind of allow B to jump in the queue. Yeah, we definitely need to kind of work on how to make that happen in the app. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm just going to, where's my chat window? I've just pasted a link into the window for the Wikipedia entry on triage. So this is the technical term for where you decide which patient gets treated first. I've actually been through this at Canberra Hospital when I collapsed in my university office and they rushed me to hospital in an ambulance. And I regained consciousness in the triage room where there was a senior nurse deciding what priority I needed. And I heard them saying, "Oh, he's an ANU academic. Oh, get him in there." So I'm sure that wasn't the reason they selected me first, but and in extreme circumstances, for example, with the current virus, for example, people who are old and with existing medical conditions, it'll be decided not to treat them because they are likely to die whatever treatment you give them, and you select someone who's younger and fitter who will live if you treat them and die if you don't. And they have to make difficult decisions of that sort.
Yeah. So I
So,
guess
but
there's some kind of ethical issues going on there. Like, how do you
yes,
determine? Yeah. You're right. Yeah.
and probably your algorithm, your system won't do that. You'll leave it to a person to do.
Mm.
But okay, that sounds reasonable application. I think in this case you want to search around and see if someone's already done this.
Yep.
In a particular area. It sounds the sort of thing where there's no doubt some very large, very expensive commercial products which hospital administrators use. But there could be an area where there's scope for a smaller, simpler one. But there may well be a bit of Sahana, or there might be another. I'm trying to think if there's another open source disaster product, Shahidi, I think it's called, African word, and it might have elements of this in it. I'll just see if I can remember how to spell it, unless somebody else has heard of it and could mention it. I'll try typing in and see if I can find it. Maybe it's Shahida. No, I just can't see it there. If I find it, I'll post it into the discussion forums. I'm just wondering whether unless there's somebody who's going to, really want to tell us about it, I'm just wondering whether I should let you get back to your teamwork.
I was going to ask, are you going to be available from now to hang out on Ramo and have a chat if anyone's got any questions, or are you offline for the rest of the afternoon, or what are you doing?
Well, I'll be at home, and I've now got, is it pronounced Ramo?
Ramo or Remo? I have conflicting information there, but Catherine corrected me to Ramo. I would say Remo. It's 6 to 1.
Okay, well, I better call it Ramo. I've actually got it to work.
Oh, fantastic!
We've been using it in Canberra for the Canberra Innovation Network startup pitches every month. But I could never get their version to work, but the version we're using today works much, much better. So I can just leave that on sitting in the background.
Fantastic.
If anybody wants to ask a question. And if I can remember how to spell Shahidi, I'll paste it to the general chat forum.
Fantastic. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, I was going to say, if there's any other questions while we're here, I saw you put your hand up, Tobias. Go for it.
Oh, sorry. I am actually in a bit of pickle. None of my teammates showed up, and when I tried to rejoin another team, the only teammate that I had also disappeared. So I'm all alone with an idea. I have a capacity of 6 people in each group, and I'm the only one here.
No worries. Well, I was actually just about to say, if anybody, I'll put a pin in that. But does anyone have any other questions for Tom while we're all together as a group, or are we happy to move back over to Ramo and have a bit of a chat there?
Oh, and I should say thank you to Cave.
True. Well, sorry, you're all, Tom. I can do a bit of a wrap up and move over, and then we can have a look and work out a new team for you, Tobias, and I can jump on and we can see what we can do.
Thanks a lot.
Not a problem. Well, thank you very much, Tom, for your answering of questions and stimulating the conversation. That was really good. That was exactly sort of what we're aiming for with these workshops, is trying to get everyone talking, ideas flowing, and sort of kick things off a bit, I guess, in the regard to that. So, as I've said, if you do need to go back over this Zoom chat at all, it will be uploaded later on with Zoom, so it may be a few hours by the time things upload and download and whatnot, but we'll be able to get that there, so you can review that later on. But please jump on Ramo now. Our floor, while we are track 2, our floor is floor 3. So jump on floor 3, join with your groups. Tobias, we can have a chat and we can work out another group for you. Tom, if you want to hang out on floor 3 and jump around for now and leave it on, we'll ping you with any messages that we might have, questions that will come through, and we can go from there.
Okay, I'll sit at the table over at the side. So anybody wants to talk can just double click on that table and come on over. Thank you very much. That was good.
Fantastic. Thank you again, Tom,
Free
for
advice.
volunteering your time. It's much appreciated.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you,
Thank
Simon.
you.
Thank you.